Many of you were at the state convention, watched that whole process of first ever instant runoff voting. Gary was the person who came out of the crowd on one ballot. You just had a press conference yesterday morning, is that correct? So if you want to kind of fill us in what you mean.
Well, I can, a couple items that I can mention that I've been doing. Well, first of all, I've been helping represent Farmers Union wherever I can and attend some of the meetings that Doug's not able to do and things like that. But a couple of big events. The USDA, or the United States Department of Justice and the United States Department of Agriculture are holding a series of joint workshops on concentration in agriculture. Their title, I attended the first one last, it was March 12th in Iowa, Ankeny, Iowa. And it's the first ever joint workshop by the two agencies working together. You got the antitrust laws were passed in the 1890s. The Packers and Stockyards Act was passed in 1921. You know, and the two agencies have never held a workshop or never worked together on these issues. You know, as we've come forward, there was reasons for that legislation to be passed. You know, and you got to wonder as you look around now in the agricultural community, is there a reason we need to look at seriously at those legislation? Are they being enforced, or other things they can do? But I attended that, and I guess I was encouraged with it. The Attorney General Eric Holder attended the meeting. He was there, and Secretary Bill Sack from the Agriculture Department, and also Assistant Attorney General Christine Varner. She's the attorney her department is in charge of the antitrust division. So it was interesting, meeting in Iowa. So we've had hearings in the past. Different departments have had hearings, but never anything ever came out of it. But this time, this is the first time we have a joint hearing, and they talking to different ones in their presentations. Senator Grassley from Iowa, Republican senator from Iowa, he mentioned that he's been in Congress for a long time, and he says this is the first time and he acknowledges the first time that these two joint meetings have been held, and he said that he's never seen the type of level of cooperation between the two agencies that he's seeing now under this administration. And he said this has been long overdue, which is true. And then Secretary of Agriculture Tom Miller from Iowa, when he spoke, he said the same thing. He said he's never seen the level of cooperation amongst the Department of Justice and the state's attorney generals. So it's gotten their attention, and they're certainly looking at it. The day of that the workshop that I attended, the title was, I think, Issues of Concern to Farmers. It was kind of a broad title. There was, you had the first panel was the political leaders, and the agency heads kind of gave their background and kind of overview of it. And then he went into an issue. There was a panel of farmers, issues of concerns to farmers, I think it was titled. And in the afternoon there was one on seed technology, and that was very interesting. You had Neil Harrell there from the retired professor at the University of Iowa or Iowa State. He's where he was from. He's very knowledgeable on a lot of issues, estate issues, tax in the seed industry. He gave a history of the laws that were passed, the seed patent laws and different things, the background, and that was interesting. And the one thing he mentioned that a lot of these, he said the problem that was happened with some of the legislation, there was never any enforcement, never any teeth put into it to enforce the things. And he said that the issue that you got coming to us now is you got Roundup Ready soybeans, and the patent goes off in 2015. And what is, he raised the question, and what is going to happen when that patent goes off? Right now, Monsanto is worldwide. They're filing the paperwork with it's like 40 countries for exporting and that type of thing, and they've been obviously approved in a lot of those countries. When the patent goes off, then we as farmers we're free to save our seed and plant our own seed. But the question remains, how is that going to affect our exports? Because the Roundup Ready seed will be mixed in with the regular seed. So it's a huge question that needs to be addressed. We all can have different views on the Monsanto or in the concentration in the seed industry, but this issue does need to be addressed and handled somehow. And so that was interesting. And then the Monsanto guy got up there and he spoke and he said, well, Monsanto's committed to do the filing of patents for 3 years, or not the patents, export papers with the other countries for 3 years, and after that they won't do it. So I mean, it made it seem out of their goodwill of their heart they're going to do that. But it is an issue, you know, as you look at, you know, farmers. You know, Doug's been promoting, you know, planting their own seed or save your seed law, or kind of in the state you're trying to do some things like that. But you know, this is where we're at. The majority of the farmers, I think they said 90-some% of the soybeans are planted Roundup ready, and 80-some% of the corn is Roundup ready. So whether you agree with it or not, it's an issue that does have to be addressed. So then there was panels on livestock. Talking to one independent producer, he kind of talked. He's a pork producer. Talked about his, you know, supplying or raising hogs and the difficulties of raising hogs and getting access to markets. And he had another, said he was an independent producer, but he's a contract producer. And he said that, you know, right now there's about 6% of the hogs on the open market are determining the price for all the contract hogs. So, you know, do we have a free market? That was, you know, the question raised. And then Secretary Vilsack asked, at the end of that panel, he asked everybody to give one thing that the agencies could do to help their particular industry. When it got to the contract pork producer, his comment was, you know, increase exports. Well, that was interesting. And the next, you know, that's fine. And then the next was an independent producer that was not a contract producer, and he brought up a chart that said that it was a chart of the cattle market. Back in 2003, I think it was, we had the BSE scare in the Canadian, or the BSE cow in Washington, and the Canadian market was closed down to cattle coming into the U.S. And at that time, the spike on the cattle market, that was the highest market we've had for live cattle, when the exports were cut off. Or, you know, so it was kind of contradictory to what the pork producer was saying, but that, you know, that was their opinions. You know, it's the first, they're going to hold a series of these hearings. There's 5 of them. That was the first one. There's going to be one on dairy, one on poultry, one on livestock, and one on margins. And the margin one is kind of concerned with like the Walmarts of the world, you know, the retailers. Are they determining the price that we get on the farm? During the farmer present, you know, the testimony by the farmers, it kind of was all over the board. There was one lady that gave testimony from, you know, basically everything is just fine. We just kind of all need to get along, and everything is just fine. Work together, and you know, then the other one's kind of pointing out there was a cattle farmer that said, you know, he has about a 15-minute window. He was saying he had about a 15-minute window during every week that he can actually market his cattle. Because he said, you know, either by then, you know, you got that 15-minute where the buyer is actually looking for cattle, then he'll give you a bid. After that point, he's got enough secured that he doesn't really need it. So you know, really wide. The testimony was all over the, you know, wide spectrum, so completely both ends of the spectrum there. So it'll be interesting to see what they do with this. I guess as farmers unions, we're encouraged that they're holding these meetings. You know, encouraging, you know, national. We've submitted testimony through national on, you know, on the hearings. Secretary or Attorney General Lori Swanson has submitted testimony too for the state of Minnesota.